This is Cassandra Kennedy and Jordan Atwater getting at you with Ag Attack. We're back for our third week in a row, and we just want to say that it's an exciting time because Doane Student Media is doing a semester-long project for the community of Doane to join the conversation on politics. And so one of the hot political issues, especially here in the state of Nebraska, is always agriculture. And so today, Jordan's going to be discussing the issue of agriculture in cities, and so how cities can be involved, how cities what they're doing right now. And I know as a city kid that before I came to Nebraska, I really knew nothing about this. So it's going to be an interesting time. But first, she has some exciting news to share to you all.
So something a little bit different. It has to deal a little bit with politics, but really exciting news for Nebraska and for the ag industry, especially the beef industry in general, is that Israel has finally dropped the 12-year ban on American beef, the shipment coming in to their country. And the reason why in the past is in 2003, there was a single confirmed case of bovine spongiform encephalopathy. So it's a type of kind of bacteria that will come with beef and produce sometimes. But after that one case, they've dropped their ban after 12 years. And actually, the first shipment that's going to be coming in is actually coming in out of Hastings, Nebraska. So that is very close to my hometown and very near and dear to my heart. So that's a success right now for agriculture and for the beef industry, is that we are getting recognized for making the changes in our production lines and reducing the risk of BSE and different types of strains of E. coli and things in our beef and meat markets, so that we can have these successful industries and that we can have interactions with Israel. So we're really excited about that. Good job to the USDA and for the state of Nebraska.
Hopefully PETA heard about that, right?
Heard about that. Look at how we're making some changes. We're trying to do the things the right way. So we're really excited about that. So congratulations to the WR company out of Hastings, Nebraska, that will be providing that first shipment of beef to Israel from the States. So to the heart of the matter, what we're talking about today is agriculture and urban areas. So basically, it's going to be a nice discussion for me and Cassandra. Cassandra coming from a very much urban background and me from a rural background, growing up in an ag community.
Confession, I didn't know what a dairy cow. I thought all cows were just black and white before I moved here, so that's fun.
And that's so common. It's really common for individuals and kids that come from urban areas don't understand different things about kind of the common basics about agriculture, which is a little sad. So what we're going to start off with today is, why is education for urban students important on agriculture? Why should we educate our urban students about agriculture? And I guess one thing I want to ask Cassandra, just to maybe share a little bit about her experience as an urban student, what her experience with agriculture education was like.
Nothing. I can't really recall a time in middle school or high school where I was ever educated on agriculture. We had you have your basic history, the history of the United States and people buying land, but probably that's the extent.
That's the extent. So you never really learned about John Deere and how his industry with the plow was one of the first kind of businesses for agricultural and really got it started on mass producing ag products.
We learned about in science and technology of how it was more of a thing about, it wasn't about agriculture, it was more about the factory lines and whatnot. And so one of the big examples is always John Deere and how it was one of the first factory line products for agriculture. Yeah. And so it made farming immensely different for the rest of the United States. Yeah, most definitely. But it was more, again, about the factory line. So.
Yeah. Well, for my background, since I grew up in a small town, rural Nebraska, and come from an ag community. Most of the students that were in my school come from an ag background. Their parents are farmers or they're producers or they have some ties to the ag industry. So we had ag classes and we learned about agriculture from a young age. We would have the high school students that would come down. We'd have FFA week and they would come down and talk about ag safety, different things about agriculture. So I grew up learning the common things that chocolate milk doesn't come from a brown cow, and different things like the stuff that you see on the interstate when you're driving by and there's people out there with a tractor, that's corn and that's made into your tortilla chips or that's made into different products. There's a ton of corn byproducts that get made into plastics and things like this. So I learned all that from a young age. So I was always shocked when I was older and we'd have young kids or some of my friends that maybe would transfer from larger cities like Omaha and Lincoln or out of state, maybe Denver or Texas, Houston, things like that. I would get these questions like, what's that thing that eats the corn during when you like get the corn off the stalk? And I'm like, oh, you mean that is our combine? That's what picks the corn.
Never a lot of people don't.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know combine. And it's not the most important thing about agriculture, but it still blew my mind that students didn't know this.
And well, I remember coming to Doan and being like, they would just drop combine in casual conversation. And I was like, what is that? And I was like, it was a shocking thing for people. You don't know what a combine is?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because we're so used to it. Most of the students, I mean, most of our student body at Doan comes from a more rural background. So they know those things. So one of the funniest questions I think I've ever gotten from a younger individual is we were talking about ag when I was in high school one time and we were at a conference and we got a question that, so chocolate milk comes from brown cows, right? And I was like, not quite. Actually, chocolate milk they come from dairy cattle, and dairy cattle come in different colors and varieties. You can have Jersey cattle, you can have your traditional, black and white cow that you see on the Dairy California commercials, things like that. So there's different breeds of dairy cattle, but the way you get chocolate milk is actually by putting chocolate syrup in the milk. But I thought everyone knew that. I didn't know there was this connotation.
I figured that.
I figured, well, and this is young kids too,
Yeah.
but so this is why I think it's important for students to learn at a young age. Maybe it doesn't have to be just a subject on agriculture, but it can be implemented into curriculum in ways where students can kind of learn about it, just in the reading or problem questions. We always have those word problem questions that we learned when we're in like second grade, up to fifth grade and sixth grade. You can implement those things in there and you still learn from that. You're still getting those little kernels of truth.
Yeah.
So it always amazed me that students didn't know this, and it scares me a little bit. This is where we get into the problems then, where we talk about people not knowing when they follow PETA or they buy into these things with Chipotle, they hadn't gotten the education on it. So we can stop those problems and stem the flow of those types of issues by educating our students earlier. So that's why it's important. To be honest,
I didn't even know why it was important to learn about agriculture until you started talking to me. I'm like, why wasn't agriculture a part of my curriculum? Because it is. It affects everything. Like, if the farmers have a bad year, the United States is going to have a bad economic year.
Exactly.
And it really does. It inhibits even my city's liquor life.
It does. Well, and that's the thing. We produce food. Everyone has to eat some sort of food product, whether it's organic or not. Someone is having a food product that has come from a farmer.
Yes.
Unless you're growing it yourself, and kudos to you for doing that, you're getting it from a farmer some way. So why wouldn't you want to know about that? I mean, if you're concerned about what you're eating, you should know at least the basics. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that's going to come from your different programs and curriculum for urban students. Most rural students are going to know these facts just because they grow up with it. The schools already have those curriculums in place. That's how they teach. They have different programming in the communities that they have those resources. But I don't believe sometimes that our larger cities really have that. I mean, if I go into LA, I think I could ask some individuals about ag things like, what's a combine? What's a tractor? What is corn? What's the difference between field corn and sweet corn? There's a large difference. One is you can eat right off the cob when it's ready, and the other one is going further to production. So it's interesting that a lot of those individuals wouldn't know those answers. Mm-hmm. Now, they could ask me any common question about gasoline or things like that, and I would know because that's in my curriculum, right?
Yeah.
But it's not in there, so they don't know. So it's important. A lot of people don't think it's important, but I think it's really important, and I think that this is an issue that we need to tackle, is being able to provide more opportunities for our urban students and our urban families, even in general, to learn more about agriculture. Just the basics. They don't have to get a PhD in ag econ or anything like that. And
it goes to kind of to that push right now with education being a top political issue.
Most definitely.
It's on every candidate's mind. How are we going to solve the education issue? And I mean, there's such a city stigma where, the farming life, that's not something prestigious. Mm-hmm. And we're such in a push where we try to get people to do these high paying jobs like business and engineering and everything, that we're forgetting about the tactical jobs that are necessary for society to run. Yeah. And if the more we forget about it, the less people we have to do that, the more that's going to go up in price. And it's such a cycle.
Well, and that's the thing, is you go to a lot of institutions, I mean, I'll talk about colleges now. A lot of colleges don't have ag programs.
No.
The most you're going to find your ag programs are in your community colleges or the state-funded institutions, which, I mean, God bless those people for having those institutions, because that's what we need. We need that type of education. But, you know, I walk around, we don't have an ag program here. It's not really in our curriculum, which, you know, that's the college's take on things. So I understand that. It's just, we have students then that don't know about these things and don't know that could be a possibility for them to go into. You could go into agronomy. If you're really into horticulture, like you like plants, you like biology, agronomy could be your thing. And that can be a really good business for you to go into. It's well paying. You can operate on your own hours. You get to interact with people, interact with farmers. Yeah, you have to have those type of people in your industry, because agronomy,
people are constantly going to buy it too, so you have repeat customers.
So you have those things. Your farmers are always going to use, you know, agronomy. You're going to use these tools. It's never going to go out of business. You can find some stable job offers, but people are not educated about this, and they don't know. So they're like you said, you find about doctors, or you find out about business opportunities, or you want to go into journalism. Those things everyone talks about in all the schools, even in your rural areas. But the urban schools, I feel like maybe not as much. The students are exposed to the opportunities that they can explore in agriculture, which then it always comes back to education, like you said, which it's really interesting. Something that we're going to talk a little bit about is actually an experience that I had in high school. When I was in my senior year of high school, we were approached in my FFA program to talk about a bill that was going to start an ag literacy task force in Nebraska. So basically what this task force was going to do is it was going to implement different things, agricultural topics, into just reading and literature. Not the main, like, it could have been a math question that was like 5 ears of field corn, just those things that can expose students to the words and the different demographics. Yeah, those different things. They would implement that into it. So they asked some students, we came and we spoke on behalf of the bill, because before that point, I didn't really realize how much ag was lacking in our more urban schools in the literacy aspect and just the education of it, because I had been exposed to it. Whereas you said you maybe learned about it a little bit through some classes, but not a whole lot.
It was so insignificant, I can't remember.
Yeah, so when I found out about this bill, I was really excited about it, and I was like, yeah, this is great. I'm going to speak on behalf of this. So a few of my students, my professors, other farmers, we went and talked about it and went and talked to the ag committee and just said, this is something that we really should do. Unfortunately, it was indefinitely postponed, so it never got passed through. But again, that comes back to politics. This is something that can be a change for our country, and something that we need to talk to our politicians about is, okay, education. Everyone's going to hit the big topics of education, the cost, the availability to students, access, all of that. But we can also ask these smaller questions like, how would you adjust this? Would you make this a priority in a way at all? You know, and we have those opportunities. We're in that changing political field right now. We have the opportunity to ask these questions. And just like this bill that came up 4 years ago, we're still experiencing that topic now, and we're still facing that issue. So politics plays a big role in how we implement these structures.
And like, even if you think about it, if people had been more educated early on about the pipeline issue, even
exactly,
and that's an agricultural thing. Like, I had no idea why that was going to be in effect. I was like, why? Yeah, sure. That sounds like it's going to make gas cheaper.
Exactly.
And then I heard about it, and it's like, that would have been a horrible thing. And the rest of the United States didn't care because they didn't know. They weren't educated on anything.
Exactly. And it kind of, to give some background, it was about the Keystone Pipeline.
Yes.
And which receives both positive and negative reviews from your agricultural committees. But basically, they wanted to do the Trans-Canada Pipeline from Canada all the way down into, I believe, Texas. I'm not really sure where they put that endpoint. But this was going to be an above ground and somewhat underground pipeline in some areas. And it was going to transfer this crude type of oil through some of our precious farmland. And what's worse, right over top of our Ogallala Aquifer, which is one of the largest stores of fresh water that we use for ag in our state. And a lot of people were like, well, this is going to decrease gas prices. But they didn't realize the backlash of what could happen. What if there was a possible leak? Now, a lot of their scientists and their experts said it'll never happen. But as we've seen with other things, never is not necessarily the word you would want to use, because accidents can happen. Things happen that we cannot plan.
Yes.
But my concern was always, okay, so what if they have a break in this pipeline and it gets into our Ogallala Aquifer? And this is an underground aquifer. There's no way that you can necessarily go and clean that out. And that's ruining a water source that people use not only for drinking water, but to nourish our plants that's feeding the world.
Yeah.
So that's where we had concern. And then you're ruining some farmland. Like, you're taking a big line and going through farmland that we're using and that people are using for a profit to feed families, to feed the world. And you're using that for a pipeline. Like, why couldn't we build the refinement plant up in Canada? Like, or why couldn't it be a little closer?
Why did it need to go to Texas?
Why did it need to go all the way through the States? And I don't know that answer. And that was always my question. But again, I knew to ask those questions because I had learned about agriculture and what the effects would be of those things early on. Students that didn't know that would be like, yeah, that's great. Like, I don't see why. So then you get all these individuals that are on the news that are going against the bill and lobbying against the bill, and people are like, well, why are they doing that? Like
what is
they're
this?
The crazy outliers that are, trying to prevent the Keystone Pipeline from being built, and they just, they're losing money or something, and it doesn't matter. And it's like, no, we're looking long term, because if you know the basics of agriculture, land, number one thing that you need for growing plants, and corn and soybeans and wheat. Second thing is water. I mean, yes, we can rely on rain, but out in the sandhills, you're going to know that you're not going to get a lot of rain, and you're not going to get a lot of draws from the well. So every drop of water is precious. So you have to consider those things. And that's why we got to talk about like agriculture in the classrooms, and we got to talk about our ag industry at an early age and be able to expose our urban population to agriculture in some way. And it comes back to politics at the same time too. It's all wrapped up into one ball.
It is.
So, but yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up though, because coming from an urban area, you probably thought your first opinion was like, that's great.
Yeah, I didn't think much of it. Like, I hadn't even heard of it really until you started talking about it. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, what's going on with that? And so then you told me about it. I was like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. But yeah, you guys got to the president, so.
We did, yeah. So it's all good. It's all good. We fought for our rights there. So yeah, it all comes down to, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but getting into the classrooms and talking to students about this early and just putting it into the curriculum. But also, there's other things that we can be doing in our urban populations as well to help with these issues. And that's starting programming, that's starting different clubs and organizations that have some of the basic agriculture. So we can talk about that after our break that we're going to have right now. So
yes. We'll be right back on 91.9 with Ag Attack. And we're back with Ag Attack here on 91.9 KDNE. To catch you up, Jordan and I are talking about education of agriculture in urban cities, because I'm an urban kid, and I can tell you that I don't recall ever learning about agriculture much. However, we did have if you ever want to interact with us while we're on the show, we highly encourage it. You can tweet at either Jordan or I, or you can tweet at KDNE. If you use the hashtag AgAttack, we'll also look for you there. We actually have a Twitter comment, so we'd like to address it.
So Darren from the Roseland area, he has been an awesome individual in my life in FFA and 4-H. He's really involved in the community, in agriculture in general. So he had a few questions that he asked me on Twitter, so I'm just going to read them real quick. He said, there is science involved in agriculture, which is so true. Science and agriculture is one hand in the other. So basically, not only do individuals, agriculture, a lot of people think sometimes ag is all about animals, plants, and farm
I thought it was
life.
Just plants. I didn't realize there was a difference between like horticulture and agriculture.
There is. And a lot of it, we need science in the sense that we have people that are making herbicides and pesticides, and that's science. So if you like chemistry and you're making chemicals, that's right up your alley. So there's science in agriculture. So it's not just about
farming,
plants and farming. I mean, you can do ag econ, you can do ag business. And I mean, you're basically just putting the title of ag in front of, so you're focusing on more the ag industry, but you're still able to do things like business. Like here at Dome, we only have a business degree, but you could apply ag to that. You could start an ag business, or economics. You can study the different things about trading for corn, things like that.
I think is fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, that's totally necessary. So yes, Darren, science and agriculture, that's a good point to make. Also, do you know that there's an old pipeline that runs through the state already that transports the same product? I did not know that. So I had to look up. I just looked up real quick, and we have the Nebraska Pipeline Association. And there's a fun fact on here that says that 25 million miles of pipeline goes through our country, and that we have at least 20,000 miles of hazardous liquid and natural gas lines in Nebraska.
Wow.
So that's really interesting to me. I knew we had pipelines, but I know the biggest one was the Keystone Pipeline. So I'm glad that Darren brought this up. It's still an issue. We have these things that are going on. Now, we haven't had problems necessarily, I don't believe, with those pipelines. I haven't heard any information on those pipelines breaking or things like that, but it's always the risk. There's the risk factor involved. But yeah, so we already have pipelines that are in Nebraska. So again, another political discussion is what are we doing for management of those, the upkeep of those, things like that. So Darren, thanks for your questions. I hope I answered them. And if you guys, if you have any questions, feel free to.
What is your
My
handle?
Twitter handle is @ and then capital J and then Jordan with a Y. It's with a Y, guys. It's a little different. And then capital A @water. So Jordan @water, and that's my Twitter handle. And Cassandra is my colleague here on the show, so she can give you hers too.
I can't give you my Twitter handle off my head, but the next break I will find that out for you, and you can tweet at me as well.
Sometimes
but you can also always tweet at KDNE.
All in caps.
All in caps.
Yeah, we're a part of KDNE here, the Edge of Indy, so we're really excited to be here today. So thank you, Darren, for your questions about the pipeline. So yes, we do have pipelines here, and I'm going to do some more research on that.
Maybe that's the next topic.
Next topic for our show. So back to a little bit, though, with our education for urban students and how to get them involved. So we've talked a lot. We've kind of hit the nail on the head with education. We got to educate our students early on, get them early in the classrooms, and then also educate them about opportunities and job opportunities, because we do need people to come back to rural areas. There's a big movement for people to move towards urban areas, but there's only so many jobs that are offered there, and we have perfectly good paying jobs here in rural areas of the state and throughout the country.
I was just looking, there's a job fair a week from tomorrow that's open to all of Doane campus, and so I was looking through the types of jobs that are going to be there, and nearly half of them are agriculture involved.
Yes, most definitely.
And I thought that was really interesting, and it was that ag econ, ag business, like all of that.
It's just, I mean, a lot of people get scared from the word ag, but it's really not that different from if you're working on marketing and then doing like an ag marketing thing, you're still doing the same exact job. One is just focusing on one topic, where the other one, you have a narrow thing, and people are looking for those jobs. People want to hire those things. See, there's a lot of job opportunities in ag. So that type of education is really important too. But now we're going to move the topic a little bit to what we can be doing in our communities for not only the education purposes, but also just getting them involved. So one of the cool things that I saw is in New York, because when I think of big city, I think of New York. So I think of, New York City, and I always wonder what they think about agriculture. I actually, funny story, and this was bad on my part. This is where I needed the education on my part. When I was in high school, we went to the National FFA Convention in Indiana, and there was an FFA group from New York, and I asked them, I was like, so what is agriculture like in New York? And well, they didn't live in a big city, and it was just like the same from ours, but I didn't know that. So that was that great opportunity to talk to someone and learn a little bit from them about their agricultural background. And me thinking New York is just all big city. I should know that there was farms in New York, but when I think of New York, I think of New York City. But with that, some of the things that New York offers, there's a thing called Kingston Land and Trust, and they do this I think it's really fascinating. They do these different camps and organizations for little kids and for their families too. So for parents and little kids to come and like plant different corn, different potatoes, like just making a garden, but also they're teaching them about the different aspects of agriculture at the same time. So they're teaching them about what is a healthy product. What are we putting into the soil? They really want to do a learning basis, but then they also do a lot of things on preservation, so we've talked about ag just in general, but preservation is a huge topic, and knowing how to correctly handle soils and things like that. Like a lot of people wonder, well, why are people leaving the stalks out in their fields? Well, it's a no-till field, so it's using that so then you're not losing a lot of topsoil. We live in a windy state, things like that. Individuals don't know that, but this group teaches people about that. They're like, well, you could leave some of this stuff on top until you go to plant, and then you can till it. You want to keep the nutrients in the soil. What about crop rotation? They're learning all of these things and how to put nutrients, goes back to science, what nutrients are going in your soils. So it's really fascinating that they're really taking this component, and it's in the heart of a city, but they take them out into a more rural landscape and they do all these activities with them. So I think that would be something that would be great for Omaha to have, because we have an abundance of resources for them to come out in the rural areas around here. I mean, Crete is a little city itself here, not quite as big as Omaha, but even here you can drive not even a mile, and you're gonna hit some type of farm ground.
And even I brought this up one time, but like for me, it was weird going to Omaha from Denver, and I had never seen like a city with a farm in it, and I saw a city, like a farm in the middle of Omaha. Came to later find out that's Boys Town's farm. Yeah. But like Boys Town still does a lot of education on it. And
and that's the fascinating thing is they're so close, yet it's so isolated away from agriculture at the same time. But these groups they're not only teaching them about the basics of agriculture and things of like plant sciences and stuff like that, but they're also teaching them about preservation. So that can move into different realms as well as marketing.
So what does preservation mean exactly?
Preservation. So if you think about preservation, it's instead of if you have a plot of land and you have this plot of land, you can have two options for it. It can either be used as a construction site for a new building, for a new high-rise, a new shopping center, or it can be preserved in a way that we could use it for agriculture, or it can just be in its natural state. Maybe it can just be a park or things like that. It doesn't even have to have more of a farming use for it. That's what preservation is about, in my mind. Now, someone can correct me on that topic, but when I think of preservation and the research I've done on it, that's mostly at the heart of the matter.
Okay.
Which we're in an ever-growing, expanding. I mean, you can drive up to Omaha, and the borders are expanding. Lincoln is expanding, and it's taking over some of these more natural areas that are either used for farmland, or if it's like a park or the water areas, those are all starting to be taken over by developments of cities.
Okay.
So these guys focus a lot on that, which I think is interesting because it's in a city. It's in one of the biggest cities in our country.
Yeah.
And they really still want to focus on this. So they're making that small little dent in our issue that we have. So I think that program itself is really, really interesting. You'll also have these other kind of groups that are like the Urban Food Pact, is a Urban Food Policy Pact. And they're groups of individuals that believe in growing their own product, which I can respect that. I mean, grow. And I mean, I
have cousins up in Wisconsin who like live in an apartment up in a city, and in their apartment they have their own chicken that they make their own eggs with, and then they have like a little garden area on their patio that they make all of their fresh vegetables with. So
and I think that's really cool, and it's a way to have that. You don't realize it, but you're performing something ag-based there in your own home.
And you have to know how to do that.
And you have to learn how to be a grower, and that's exactly what your farmers are doing. So there's a connection right there. That's our urban rural connection right there. So the Urban Food Policy Pact is really interesting. They have sustainability goals. So agriculture is based in sustainability goals as well. And that's just basically, how are we going to be able to sustain what we're doing? How are we not going to use up our resources? People don't understand that sometimes even the water resources that we have we have to worry about sustainability. So if we have a dry year, you might have to put a meter on your well so that you're not using too much water in that time period. So sustainability, how are we going to be using this effectively and most efficiently so that we can get the best product? So they're really big on sustainability, and that's in an urban area. So while they may think that that's not ag-based, it is. And that's what the cool thing is we're having these urban-rural connections between education and then these groups like this. And I don't know, did Denver have anything like that?
You're probably asking the wrong person.
No, that's okay.
I didn't follow up. I know we had a big thing with pollution a couple of years ago where we went in and like farmers worked with the city people to like work with our pollution. I don't know how that translates.
No, but I mean, it's close. It's the same thing. It's just these interactions though. It's getting outside of your bubble. I want to call it a bubble because in all honesty, I can get in a rural bubble pretty easily.
And so I can easily be in my urban bubble.
In an urban bubble. So it's just being able to reach outside that and make those connections and just a little bit of understanding. You don't have to be an expert in it, but it's a little bit of understanding. So these groups are really interesting, and they're not just happening in the States, which is fascinating. It kind of started in the States maybe a little bit as a trend, but it's expanded to worldwide. So you'll see about these different urban growing groups or groups like the Keystone Land Trust. You'll see these groups like that are really focusing on how are we going to bring nature and just kind of the natural environment to our urban areas so we can preserve those. Because if we don't really care about it, we can easily lose that. I mean, like we said earlier with that movement, if we outgrow our areas and we aren't concerned about the surrounding farm ground, the surrounding just natural environments, we can outgrow what we're already in. And then we're going to start seeing problems of not being able to produce quality foods. We'll start getting into pollution issues, things like that. So it's really interesting that this trend is not just in Nebraska. It's not just in the United States. It's worldwide. Everyone's concerned.
When my best friend just studied abroad in Norway.
Yeah.
And so when I got there and I visited her there, she was talking about the reindeer burgers and how Norway is really proud of their meat. And so they make sure their meat's from Norwegian farmers, and they have this whole campaign about Norway Farm. And she said that part of her lesson while she was studying there, she did learn about Norwegian agriculture and visited farms. And
that's cool.
So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
That's actually a part of their curriculum.
See, and I think it's awesome. I'm like, yes, power to that type of curriculum, because even though they're not involved with it, they know about it, and then they can prevent things like bills that are going to come in and make issues for your industry and change that in a negative way, and they can stop those.
Chipotle because you think they're
because you think that they're giving you non-GMO foods. Yeah, exactly. So, and that's what we need to start doing a little bit more in the U.S., because we have those avenues. We have, one of the best industries of agriculture in the world. We are very much on the progressive end of science and technology, with not only our harvesting part of the industry, but also in the plants, the seed sciences, and the different genetics that we have with cattle and things like that. It's all encompassed in this one big ball of, I want to say, awesomeness in the United States, because it really is. But I know that was one thing when I was abroad too. They didn't have a curriculum in Germany. One of my friends, they made a lot of cow jokes at me because I said I was from a farm. But when I started to talk about it and talk about my passions, they got educated, and then they're realizing, well, geez, there's some things that we're doing here in our own little town of Karlsruhe, Germany, that we would like to change. I'm like, yes, ag advocacy at its best. I was so excited about that. But this is what these groups can do, and it's so cool. And I think it's so fascinating. And even we're having these progressive things happen in Nebraska as well. We're having these groups get started up in our urban areas. So one of the things that I think is really cool is, FFA, I know I've talked about FFA in the past. I think that was our very first show.
Future Farmers of America, for those of you who don't know. I didn't know when I first
Nope, it's okay. And that's actually the old name. Now it's just considered the National FFA organization, but it originated as Future Farmers. So
really?
They kind of changed the name because a lot of people put a negative connotation with future farmers. I can't be a part of FFA if I'm not going to be a future farmer, because in all honesty, like we talked about agronomy, ag business, ag econ.
Oh, yeah.
That's not really farming,
yeah,
but it's still encompassed in FFA. So they've changed it now, so it's the National FFA organization.
Interesting.
I mean, they still use FFA, so some people still think that it's called, and I'm fine with calling it future farmers, but that's where we kind of get that dichotomy.
Gotcha.
But one of the coolest things is we're seeing a lot of schools in Nebraska that have never had an FFA program are now starting to get an FFA program, and one of them is an Omaha school, which awesome. Hands down. When I went to FFA, the state FFA convention, I saw mostly your smaller schools, maybe your B, C schools, were never Class A. Never. And never Omaha. I've never really seen an Omaha school. So I thought that was really interesting. And even other schools that are more rural, like Silver Lake back by my hometown is getting an FFA program. Adams Central, they're all getting programs like this. So we're seeing this movement where those areas, maybe not Silver Lake, but Adams Central is by Hastings, a more urban population, even though there's a lot of rural kids that go into that school, are starting to kind of get these ag programs for students. And even Omaha. I mean, Omaha is definitely urban.
Yeah.
And so I don't really know what the population of students is necessarily like, if they have a lot of ag students or not, if they have students with ties to educating them on agriculture, but they're getting them ready for their professional career. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm so excited. I'm like, yes, we're getting that little foothold, because if one Omaha school sees that and sees that these students are getting these professional things alongside agriculture, maybe the other schools are going to as well. And then maybe we can stop this circle of not knowing about agriculture and not being educated.
So how do you think Omaha schools, though, are going to combat? Because that club, Future Business Leaders of America does a lot of that,
Yes,
too.
most definitely.
So, how do you think that FFA is going to work with that?
So we actually, back at my high school, we always have had FFA, but we have gotten an FBLA program. And it is a program then for individuals that maybe if they don't want to do anything with agriculture, they can do FBLA. But I think they can coexist in a way. I think that while they do have the same elements, there's some things in FBLA that FFA does not have. And there's some things in FFA that FBLA does not have.
Yes.
So just even having the opportunity to give those kids access to agriculture or livestock management, which I'm pretty sure FBLA does not have livestock management.
But
I can't speak for that, but.
Does FFA have like horse showing, or is it strictly like cow and?
Nope, it's all types of animals. Like we do not judge against any type of animal.
I don't see like an Omaha kid.
No.
But a lot of city kids have horses.
Exactly. But they can get access through the FFA program. You can get funds to go do these things. And there's plenty of areas and there's plenty of farmers. I know a lot of kids that lived in my hometown, that lived in the town themselves, didn't have a farm, but they were able to go to a friend's house or a local farmer and raise cattle there and be able to show them then in the summer. So you can still do things like that. I mean, most of the farmers I know are pretty generous with availability of space and wanting to work with you because we all are advocates in a way and we want to help you learn. So, they have those opportunities. But I do agree. Not everyone's going to have a cow or a goat in their backyard. So that's not...
Actually, I knew a kid in high school who had a goat. She had 2 goats and like 3 geese.
Interesting.
A pony.
Totally can do that. That's your lifestyle, go for it. But I mean, most people don't quite have that. No, they don't quite have that. But that's where then you can get into maybe horticulture. Or maybe you can do livestock management. And so you're just learning about management styles, but still you're just doing it on the emphasis about the topic of livestock.
Yeah.
So that's where FFA can really get involved. And that's why when you hear about these more urban schools getting these programs, I get really excited. Most people will be like, oh, it's just another extracurricular for the students. But for me, that looks like a foothold for people to learn about agriculture. And that gets at access, and even in general.
I totally agree. But I also, like, coming from my school, I'm trying to think of how, like, the school would kind of market that and actually get kids into it. Because, like, high school me would have been like,
yeah. And, I think that's something that you can market it in a way. You have a lot of individuals that are concerned about the environment. Best way to get involved is agriculture. You're learning about the environment. You're learning about agriculture, environment, same thing.
Or maybe they can team up with FBLA and like have meetings together.
Exactly.
And can transfer back and forth.
And it's a transfer of knowledge.
Yeah.
So yes, in their urban schools, it's harder to get that foothold. That's why, like, when you talk about Omaha, you're like, wow, they're actually like getting that, because I'm sure they do have an FBLA program, which is
they have a huge
similar,
FBLA.
and like our professional events are very similar to FBLA. So in the sense of like the competition side of things. Yeah. But it's also, we talked about on campus a couple weeks ago, access, about things. We had a speaker come on campus. And it was more on the access about diversity. But I always feel bad for the urban kids that don't have access to education on agriculture or access to these programs where they can if they want to. I mean, until I got to college, I never thought I would be on a radio show where I always knew I'd be an ag advocate, but until someone kind of gave me that access to it, I would have never pursued anything like that. So these students, they may not know about it, but if they can just have that little plug in their ear, and maybe they'll find that's their passion, and maybe they'll be the next John Deere.
You never know.
You never know. So that's what's exciting. That's why we need these opportunities in these programs, and we need our influential individuals of the states to get on board with that.
Yeah, it's another political thing that Governor Pete Ricketts maybe might be like, yeah, let's institute these things. No,
that would be great. No, I would be all for that. Yeah,
lobby for it.
Lobby for it. Yeah, be an ag advocate, everyone. Be an ag advocate.
That's what your name should be. Not ag tag
advocate. Yeah, we could ag advocacy. That's such a tongue twister though. Like ag advocacy. But yeah, no, it's definitely. I think if we can get those influential people, I mean, if you could get like a celebrity to come in and talk about agriculture.
Yeah.
Like, okay, when we had The Bachelor, I know this is a lot of people are going to be like, Jordan, why are you bringing this up? But when Chris Soules said he was a farmer from Iowa, people were like, oh, farming.
I remember that.
And they gave him a little respect, because then they're like, they found out how much he was farming and what he was involved in. And maybe not all farmers are fond of Chris, or maybe they are. But we got the recognition, and we're like, farming was like a thing that everyone that watched The Bachelor Nation out there is pretty big.
I mean, it is like the stereotype that girls go for, I want a farmer when I marry or something like that. Yeah.
Well, and everyone's like, oh yeah, I want a cowboy, things like that. But like, the thing I appreciate about Chris Soules is he does do a lot of ag advocacy. He uses his platform as a well-known individual now because he was able to reach a large audience to do and speak about different things in agriculture. Yeah. And that's what we need to get these footholds and get the urban population. I mean, more people are probably going to watch The Bachelor than an ag show. But if you can combine the two, it's it's a ball of awesomeness.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I'm going to start using that.
Hashtag of the show.
Hashtag of the ball of awesomeness. But yeah, no, if we can get more individuals like that to come and make these issues well known. Yeah. That would be great. Yeah. So,
what about speaking of celebrities, I knew when I was maybe a freshman, I think Michelle Obama, she was doing a big thing with health in schools and having healthy eating, and she got some criticism for that and maybe not have been implemented the best way. But I know that in the process, she did go around the states and she visited farms, specifically looking at organic farms and how that can be more common and less so expensive and fattening type thing. So I was just curious what your thoughts are on her programs per se.
So I guess from more of a political and from the heart of the matter, when she came in with the healthy lunch that was going to be her issue that she was going to tackle when her husband was in office, which I think is fantastic. Now, do I necessarily think sometimes the options that they were choosing for the portions and what they were doing there were feasible for schools just because of the price? Not so much. But then that's why she went to the farms. That's where she went directly to the source to be like, where can we start making this an easier process? So getting healthier foods for individuals is not so expensive, and that schools like my school, that's a public school, can afford to have those healthy, nutritious meals that I'm proposing, but not be going bankrupt from it.
And trying to partner with local farms maybe.
Exactly. And so I think I really like that effort. I really appreciate that effort because while it was intentional or not, she brought the topic up of concerned, everyone is affected by agriculture in that sense, because every student in America that would be affected by this proposed plan, if all those schools could buy produce from a local farm or from a local food market, think about how much students are going to, their parents are going to know about that. Yeah. Kids are going to be able to say, I know, this comes from this local farm. I don't really know about it, but maybe it sparks that interest. So I really appreciate that. And I think she has a good platform to do it. Mm-hmm. I just wish that it was, again, more on the education of agriculture, which is fine. I mean, with her the food standards that we have in our school need revisions, and I think that's the only topic that she was trying to hit, and she just brought in the ag part. It was that tag on at the end just to see how we could reduce costs. I like it. I would go back to more the education.
It wasn't solving the root of the problem.
It wasn't solving the root of the problem because she's not going to be able to get the support for that type of programming until people are educated about, okay, if individuals are educated about how we can make organic farming or these food products more available to our schools, okay, the way they're going to figure out about that is knowing about agriculture and being educated about agriculture. Then we can pass these type of issues. Mm-hmm. But I like where she's going with it. I think it's interesting. Now, not everyone's going to like Michelle Obama's new food standards for our school, but she's an influential person. Yeah. Everyone knows the First Lady's name. Mm-hmm. So that's where we have that urban population, and we can make those really big connections. So I like that she visited farms. I mean, I would love to see President Obama come to some farms. That would be pretty cool.
I'm from Colorado, she's mentioned. Yeah. And I visited the Palisade farm up in Palisade, Colorado. Oh. And it's they make famous peaches throughout the nation. And so it's the Palisade peaches. Oh. And when I was there, there was a blue ribbon around the peach tree that the Obama family picked their peaches from.
Really?
So they apparently maybe there's just more, maybe that's part of a media problem.
I would say.
I would take that on us why do we focus on certain issues and we don't give agriculture much of platform to speak on? And so,
well, and it comes down to, I can't remember the exact name, but I know there was some lobbyists that were concerned with ag techniques with how we're farming, because they were afraid we're losing too much topsoil, and then there was pollution from our farming industry that was increasing the pollution in the United States, and how then even our feedlots are increasing the methane concentration in there. And I'm like, okay, if you knew the basics of agriculture, like correct farming procedure and things like that, like you're always going to lose some topsoil every year. Like it's always going to be decreasing in a way. But our farmers are using techniques to combat that effect. Mm-hmm. And feedlots are not, in our farming industry of like tractors and combines, are not what's really increasing the pollution. So you want to go more towards your larger cities where we don't have people carpooling and using bikes.
We literally have a visible bubble of pollution over the city of Denver. Like, it was a serious issue.
Yeah, so it's just like these issues where politics come into place, where education is maybe they don't really know, and it kind of goes back to our Chipotle issue and PETA, where people just don't understand. We can solve all of this if we have more of these programs where they can learn in urban areas, or it's instituted into the curriculum. That, in my mind, that solves a lot more of the issue than just let's start passing some bills on decreasing pollution. Well, why don't we like educate people on like the difference between these types of pollution?
For sure.
Things like that. So
okay, we will wrap up Ag Attack after this last short break. Again, now's your time to tweet any questions, to ask
Hit us up with
anything.
Some questions.
Again, our Twitter handle is at KDNE, all capitals, or at Jordan, JORDYN, capital J, Atwater, capital ATWATER. We'll be right back, and don't go anywhere. All right, we're back with Ag Attack here on KDNE 91.9. If you were listening to that last little promo, I will throw a shout out to them. They're doing a sports show live coverage of Doan Athletics, so stay tuned for those. 91.9. That's a really exciting development for the radio station.
Woot woot, go Doan.
So Jordan's been talking about the education of agriculture into our urban cities. Yes. Do we have any tweet questions?
I just got another tweet just now, just in. Back from Darren. Darren
he's on the ball.
Yeah, he's really knowledgeable about the ag industry and ag issues. So he was just saying that him and his wife did an ag in the classroom. They adopted a classroom in Omaha, and they do that every year. So I didn't realize that is also another way where even farmers on our part can do a little bit more to educate the urban areas on what we're doing and just why it's important too.
That is a really cool idea. And I know my mom's a teacher, and she would love that. She's a business teacher at a high school in a very urban area. Yeah. And a low income school even, where I am sure her students would love to hear a guest speaker talk about agriculture and ag business and all that involves that. So.
Yeah, no, and I think, Darren, keep doing what you're doing, and all of our farmers out there that are pursuing those type of opportunities, that would be awesome if we can keep those going, and we can do more of those if we can convince more people to do things like that. Because, I mean, it all gets down to the heart of the matter. We have to have this transfer of knowledge between the two groups. Because even with what urban groups are doing, we as farmers need to know that as well, because we're both affected. It's a symbiotic relationship. We affect them, they affect us. Everything kind of goes together. So I just kind of want to go back through just what we talked about, just kind of re-highlight everything. So when we started off today, we were just talking about why it's important, which I think we've kind of hit pretty heavily, that our urban students need to know more about agriculture so they can be more informed for politics, they can be more informed at where their food comes from, and they can make the smart decisions and not feel like they're making the wrong decisions in a way. When you have your more rural individuals will sometimes, like how I was with Cassandra, would be like, hey, Cassandra, I don't think that's quite right. Here's why. We can have that transfer of knowledge. So that's why it's so important.
I've learned so much since I've lived with my friends. I remember going on a road trip with one of my sweet mates, Mariah Carlin, who should be listening right now. And we were driving by fields, and I was like, what plant is that? That's like not corn. I thought.
I know, it happens all the time.
And she was like, Cassandra, that's like alfalfa or sprouts. And I was like, what? That's a thing?
Yeah.
Like, such a small mind from a city perspective. But
Yeah.
I am so glad I had the opportunity to learn about it. And I realized as a business major how influential it is even to my life now.
Exactly.
So,
well, and I remember when you first came back with me to my family farm.
yes.
And you got to interact with the cows. You got to interact with, we went on the farm equipment. I was showing you everything that we do on the farm.
It was the
And I
best.
had so much fun. And I'm betting that individuals out there that are sharing their ag stories are having just as much fun sharing your passion as well. So that's another way. That's how we share this education to students. And so we talked a little bit earlier, too, about the current atmosphere in schools towards ag. And we're seeing this change now where we're having FFA go into the more urban areas like Adams Central and Omaha, and hopefully in other states as well. We're going into more urban areas, but also hoping that we can turn this around and maybe get that LB 884 back into play where we're having an ag literacy task force and we're able to implement this into the curriculum so that the atmospheres in schools are educated and they're not asking questions like chocolate milk and brown cows, because that is a little sad to me. And then also we talked about the different organizations that are already in place in our urban cultures right now, and things from the Kingston Land Trust and FFA and your urban growers, policy planners, things like this. Those are great and what we need to keep up. And then going back to FFA, and I know FFA is always, obviously close to my heart, so I always talk about that, but we do always appreciate those things. So that's kind of what we've hit on tonight, is just our urban-rural relationship and transfer of knowledge about agricultural issues and agricultural perspectives to each side. So I'm really glad. I hope you guys all enjoyed the show tonight. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate Cassandra's perspective on a lot of these.
It's been a fun educational experience. Even today I learned something
Yeah.
new. So if you want to learn something new about the agriculture business, or if you just like talking about it, we will be back at 5 p.m. next Tuesday for Ag Attack with Jordan Atwater here on KDNE 91.9.